You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 44 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam. With me, as always, is Cal. Cal, we got a really exciting episode, maybe one of the best episodes of any of the DCAU shows here today.
I would definitely agree with you, and not just because we are such an agreeable pair. Liam, this episode that we have to talk about today, which is Legends, Justice League episode here, is near and dear to my heart, is one of my favorite of all time in the DCAU Review. I absolutely adore this episode. Yeah. So many great things here to talk about today. I'm excited. We're talking about this episode when we decided we were going to do some more Justice League episodes and that we weren't just going to kind of go down the path and stick to the order of airing. I was excited because I knew that this was one that I would want to review. So I'm excited to jump in and talk about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from here we can jump right into plot. Tale as old as time. The Justice League's fighting a big old robot in the middle of Metropolis, it appears.
Who's manned by a person who is clearly Lex Luthor. This is just sidebar. Clearly it's Lex Luthor. Yet they almost make it remain a mystery as if
they intentionally don't show his face.
Right, like it's supposed to be some sort of big mystery. He's wearing Luthor's armor. He's clearly Lex Luthor,
right?
Yet they choose not to reveal his identity in this, which led me to believe that maybe this episode aired out of order and you weren't supposed to know,
right.
Or maybe previously there was, I don't know, Lex was supposed to die, it was supposed to look like he died at the end of the last episode. I don't know. It's very strange that they don't acknowledge him, and there's no DVD commentary to listen to find out why.
Right.
Anyway, small complaint.
Right, but as this big giant robot explodes, the Flash is also running very fast around it, trying to keep it from falling on the rest of the unconscious League members of Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Martian Manhunter. That creates, of course, a classic Flash moment as he runs so fast that he creates he rips through reality and transports all of them to an alternate dimension.
Yeah, and if you've watched any of the Flash TV series or you've ever read any of the comic books, this is a regular occurrence.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to transport in between time and rip holes into the time-space continuum is sort of the Flash's MO, but this is the first time in the Justice League, at least, that we see this sort of crossing over into another dimension. It's later on, there's some exposition from Tom Turbine, who explains sort of the multiverse theory, which of course is a classic part of the DC universe and DC Comics, and
also harkens back to those original 60s Justice League Justice Society crossovers where it was established they were on alternate Earths, and even before you got on all the crazy crises and stuff like that.
Correct.
Even back to the very first, it was kind of established these are two alternate worlds with alternate histories.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like you said, they go to this alternate dimension. They end up in a place called Seaboard City.
Did you hear what he called me? Yeah, Green Guardsman? What's up with that?
Perhaps you haven't heard, but in Seaboard City, crime doesn't pay.
Which, in case you haven't heard, in Seaboard City, crime doesn't pay.
Correct.
And it's a flashback to the 1950s era of comic books. You have these characters who obviously represent the old incarnations of the Justice Society. Now I definitely remember reading someplace there was something more or less because of the type of story they were telling. DC Comics was not a fan of them basically crapping all over the 60 or 70 year history of the Justice Society by turning them into sort of not necessarily villains, but caricatures, I guess.
Yeah.
So they wanted to pay respect without taking a crap all over that history. So they came
without killing them off either.
That too, yeah, killing the characters in case down the line they were able to use these guys.
Right, and several of them are the actual incarnations of Black Canary and Wildcat.
Right.
certainly, and not this version of. I mean, Tom Terrific is sort of between Golden Age Superman and the Atom, the original Atom. So not quite that, but the Atom does appear later. So you would have. It would have been tougher to do Justice League Unlimited had they used the actual Justice Society here.
Absolutely. And it's a shame we never actually got incarnations of, the Jay Garrick Flash, who the Streak represents, or Alan Scott, Green Lantern, who, of course, Green Guardsman is representative of. You do have this episode, which kind of fills that hole for you, and gives you a taste of probably what your parents or maybe your grandparents, the comic books that they read, and it harkens back to that simpler time. So right away, though, the Justice League is suspect that something is afoot,
right?
And they spend the majority of the first episode battling these villains who also represent some of the I guess it's Silver Age, right?
Golden and Silver
Age villains.
You have the Music Master, who is sort of a stand-in for the Fiddler. Mm-hmm. Of course, later on Brave and the Bold show, there was the Music Meister, who's also a takeoff on that character.
There you go.
You also have the Sir Swami, who is a takeoff on the Wizard. His design looks, we can get that more in visuals, but he just looks like a third season Adam West Bat villain.
That's true.
And then you have the
Sportsman,
who is of course the Sports Master. And then you have
Dr. Blizzard.
Dr. Blizzard, who is the Icicle, pretty much straight up, except in a doctor's outfit instead of his more traditional supervillain garb. But
so you have these homages to that era. These guys are the villains that are attacking Seaboard City. The Justice League, or the member Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter, and the Flash are all helping kind of save the city. And as they are doing so, they start to come to realize that things aren't right. It starts with Hawkgirl discovering some graves.
Yeah,
on the outskirts.
That's the end of part one,
which is an interesting way to leave a cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
Bold move, and I think it works. I mean, obviously we watch these part 1 and 2 back to back, but I think as a cliffhanger it works really well.
Yeah, it's one of the better. If you look, they tried to basically end every part 1 with a pretty big moment, and this is, I think, definitely the best cliffhanger that they did. Even though it's kind of weird to say that, like you said, because we watched these back to back.
Right.
Imagine as these were airing on TV, one part a week. It's a pretty great dramatic cliffhanger to end on, especially because the first part is so light, mm-hmm. and so it's a lot of jokes and funny stuff, and homages to there's also some 60s Batman thrown in there. Sure. With the Irish police captain, the red phone, and most of Ray's dialogue sounds like it could have been Burt Ward Robin stuff. So Definitely. It's got a couple wholly blank moments in this episode as well.
Absolutely.
So and then you end on that note, and then you begin part 2 with Green Lantern and Hawkgirl kind of investigating, while Martian Manhunter and the Flash and the rest of the Justice Guild are fighting with these very cartoonish villains. And then once the villains are captured, we go back to the Justice Guild's headquarters. And that's sort of when the big reveal is made, as Green Lantern and Hawkgirl discover that the real Justice Guild died, and that this version of Earth was basically destroyed by nuclear war over 40 years ago, and they can't exactly figure out why somebody's pretending, but they realize that somebody is controlling this sort of Matrix-type scenario for them, mm-hmm. and that's when Martian Manhunter, I guess, sort of cyclically realizes that Ray is the source of it all, and is real. Ray shows off his true form, this really deformed, looks like something out of one of the Fallout games, really.
Yeah, he's clearly been deformed by nuclear fallout. So
yes, so so it's revealed that he created these versions of his childhood heroes, basically because he gained these powers after the world was destroyed by nuclear war. And rather than trying to cope with the world as it was, he wanted to retreat back into this sort of safe, secure world, which leads to the Justice League fighting him. They get overmatched, and these Justice Guild, in full realization that if they defeat Ray, they are going to cease to exist. And I don't want to go on for 10 minutes here, but I want to make a point of this, because this to me is what the superhero genre can do that no other genre of entertainment, that any type of story can tell. Because you take characters especially a character like Superman, these very powerful characters, the idea that everyone would like to think that in that moment they would be willing to step up, and even if they didn't think we're not coming back from this mission, but it's the right thing to do, and we'll save lives doing it, and we got to do it this way, no matter the cost.
Yep.
And that, to me, it's such this beautifully heroic moment. As the Justice Guild then attacks, they shout, "Let justice prevail," and they attack Ray, they defeat him, and then they all cease to exist. And that's basically the end of the episode, is Green Lantern powers up Tom Terrific's interdimensional gateway, and they go home, and that's kind of the end.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's super, like, it's silly as it sounds, like, it's super emotional at the end.
Oh my gosh, I had tears in my eyes.
It's so great. So, let's get into scores. We could literally talk about this all day. So my score for plot, it's perfect. I gave it 10 out of 10. It is tremendous. I love this episode from start to finish. It's great. There's highs, there's lows, there's times that you're laughing, times that you're chuckling, times that that you feel stress and angst, and there's mystery, and then at the end, like you said, the sacrifice that the Justice Guild makes in order to save the Justice League, like you said, knowing full well that they themselves would cease to exist. Yeah. Just every time it gets me, man. It's awesome. It's perfect. So I gave it 10 out of 10. What about you?
Same. I was at 10 out of 10. And if you want to nitpick stuff, you can here. Mm-hmm. But I don't. But I don't really like the stuff like, okay, Martian Manhunter just suddenly discovers, because throughout the part 1 and the beginning of part 2, Martian Manhunter is sort of having these flashes where he basically sees the bombs going off, and he sort of sees the world as it actually is, with the buildings all wrecked. So it's sort of set up that Jean is having these visions, then he sort of just discovers that it's Ray. And then, as you mentioned at the end, the Justice League wasn't even aware that the other humans that we see, the guy driving the ice cream truck, the mayor of the town, the police, were also real people.
They were trapped, right?
Right, because obviously the Justice Guild were all illusions, but the rest of these people were trapped, living these sort of cardboard lives to keep up the illusion that Ray had set up.
Yeah.
So if you want to nitpick there a little bit, you can, but I just think overall, and it's for everything that it was, the homage to the Golden Age, to the heroic nature of the Justice Guild's sacrifice, to the personality that you get a little bit more infused. We talked about this in Blackest Night. We got a little bit of who Jon Stewart is in that episode, his feelings on like accountability of superheroes and stuff. But here we understand a little bit more about who Jon is as a person.
Yeah.
And he talks about how these comics that he read when he was a kid taught him what it meant to be a hero. And it's really, like, you really feel for Jon Stewart, and all of the characters, but especially for Jon, as he's watching his literal childhood heroes fade away into the sunset.
Yeah.
It's so emotional. It's so well done.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That's why we both gave it 10.
Yes. So we can move right on here to music. We talked about this a little bit while we were watching it. There's a lot of scenes where the music is not overbearing. There aren't like a ton of traditional, like, big grand themes, like a Batman theme or a Superman theme. Mm-hmm. But that almost plays to its favor. The scene where they're visiting the graves, there's very light music underneath of that that adds to that tone when they're searching through the library and they're in the subway station that's been destroyed. And then you get the very sort of more triumphant music when the Justice Guild decides to fight Ray at the end. It
reminded me a little bit of the Apocalypse Now soundtrack. When we talked about that episode. And that episode, a lot of battling, a lot of fighting.
Yes.
Definitely a more serious tone throughout that episode, but obviously it crescendos to the point of Dan Turpin dying.
Right.
And the emotional letdown of that at that point. It's a very similar feeling for me at the end of this episode, because you have the emotional crescendo of them taking on this monster that has created this world, and is threatening to kill these these other heroes. They give themselves up for it.
There's a little bit of Return of the Jedi to that moment too, when Rey has Jon Stewart sort of in the air and he's sort of slowly killing him, and the Justice Guild kind of all turn and they have to make the decision, and the music really swells there.
Agreed.
To add to that.
And then when they, like you said, as they're fading kind of into non-existence anymore, and that the light behind them shines, there's piano that crescendos. That's really good. Yeah, I think the music plays really well into this. Now, the only thing I was missing, I wish there had been sort of like a Justice Guild theme or something. Like, I think there's a little bit of one, but it doesn't stand out. It's not like the Grey Ghost. It's not, or
even something like the Blackhawks theme that we got in Savage Time later on.
Absolutely, yeah, something that would be memorable specifically for them. Because of that, and I'm okay to look at this in like a critical eye. I do love this episode, but seeing that as something that may have been absent, I gave music 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went 7 out of 10. It's strong. It's very, very good. Like I said, it works that it holds back, because when it does swell in the bigger moments, I think that really works to its advantages. Not perfect, but still very good.
Agreed.
Moving on right along to visuals and animation, we obviously can just probably do an entire podcast just on the design of the Justice Guild's world.
Sure.
From, as we mentioned, they're all supposed to be they're sort of amalgams of different Golden Age heroes. You've got Wildcat mixed with sort of a Golden Age Batman. Mm-hmm. You've got Black Canary, whose name is Black Siren, who of course is the name they end up using for the on Arrow as like the Earth 2 version.
Right.
Of the Black Canary, so yeah, a little bit of crossover, and the way maybe some of these influence the stuff that comes after it as well. And then you have the Green Guardsman is almost, he doesn't have the red shirt,
right,
but otherwise he is almost straight up Alan Scott, Green Lantern, and same with the Streak. His helmet's a little different. It's like a little like race car helmet with goggles rather than the Mercury Messenger of the Gods helmet, but still really, really great. And you add in the villain designs and just the overall world, all the people walking around in 50s clothing. Talk about setting the atmosphere for this.
Yeah, it's a fantastic looking episode too, and we've talked before about how episodes that are set in the daylight sometimes can look really, really bad. I did not get that feeling in this episode. This whole episode is bright and sunny. There's no the only nighttime is literally the first 30 seconds, the opening before the opening credits.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Everything else is set during daytime, and it didn't look bad. Maybe it's because there wasn't as much of a contrast between the nighttime and the daytime, so you kind of get used to it. But to me, I thought they did a great job. It didn't look out of place at any point. It didn't look really wonky. There was nobody that looked terribly off model. So I think that this episode looks great. That's something else that I think adds to it. You have one of the cool things that I love is when Dr. Blizzard freezes the Flash and Black Siren in the block of ice initially, and they freeze, and you look at him straight on, and the Flash is laying down on his back, and Black Siren kind of has her hand up, sort of to protect herself, and then they cut to like the side profile of it, and they're in the same exact position. And I was like, man, that's a cool detail that they were able to keep that same position, and it looks like as if a camera had switched around to the other side. So visuals are fantastic in this episode. I gave it a 10 out of 10.
Wow. Yeah, I was right around there, 8 out of 10. I think they're really, really strong. There's a great shot at the end when the Guild is fighting Rey, where he's sort of got this big protective bubble around them, and they all go down and like individually start punching him, and they do this great 360 shot where you're following Rey around in a circle, and you see the Justice Guild members on the outside of the force field all beating away at it.
Yep.
It's a really, really tremendously well done thing, and I always anytime you get that sort of 360 stuff in what is 2-dimensional animation, I always think that always stands out to me as so impressive.
Definitely, and the closing shot as they disappear.
Oh my gosh,
man! I mean, we already talked about it with the music, but them standing there, the Streak puts his hand up, gives Jon Stewart the salute,
correct,
and then they just kind of fade away, and then Jon exclaims, "No!"
the ring fading off of his finger.
Man, So good, man. It's so good. We could talk about that.
Yeah,
we could do an entire podcast on talking about this during this podcast.
Yeah, even like the body language at the end when Hawkgirl and John are talking when they're back at the Watchtower and she sort of is trying to comfort him. It just feels very natural and very, very human.
True. Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree.
And moving on to our final category, which of course is voice acting.
Yeah, man. What's who do we have? Who do we have today that's of note?
We got a lot of people. First one I think worth mentioning. Well, there's two actually. Jennifer Hale plays Black Siren. Okay. She of course goes on to play Killer Frost and Giganta later on in Justice League. Veteran voice actress. She's in a lot of stuff. You have just a great cast. Ted McGinley as Tom Turbine. Such a tremendous Golden Age Superman stand-in.
Yep, absolutely.
If Stephen Root as Catman does a good job. He's probably the one that has the least amount of dialogue of any of them. So he's just kind of got to play gruff, tough guy. But he does a pretty solid job of that.
Sure.
You have William Catt as the Green Guardsman, who is just tremendous.
Yeah, he's really good. I can't. My ring doesn't work against aluminum.
Yes, another homage to the Alan Scott Green Lantern, of course, is lantern ring didn't work on wood.
You could spend probably like an hour just working on talking about the Easter eggs in this episode and the homages.
That's an entirely separate episode. And if you go to like the DCAU wiki, you can just read all the little references, some of the names on the gravestones, stuff like that. We have David Naughton as the Streak, who probably has the most to do out of the Justice Guild cast.
He talks an awful lot,
and he's tremendous, both as that more traditional superhero, like a Super Friends type voice actor, but he's also got some gravity to do, because especially once they start to realize that something's up, and then once they understand what's happening,
definitely,
they've all got a part to play there that I think is really good. And then, of course, playing Ray was one Neil Patrick Harris.
Get out!
Television's Neil Patrick Harris playing Ray Thompson, of course, from How I Met Your Mother and
Doogie
Howser, the Harold and Kumar movies, Broadway, and plenty of other...
The Tony Awards.
Yes, plenty of other movies and television and stage work as well.
Get out of here.
He's really, really good, too.
Yeah.
It's funny to me because out of his voice acting work, he plays Nightwing in the Under the Red Hood movie. And he also played Spider-Man on the very short-lived CGI Spider-Man cartoon from the early 2000s.
Okay.
And I don't think he was... I never thought he was bad, but I didn't think he was like particularly great in either of those roles.
Yeah, I didn't like him. I actually didn't like him as Nightwing. I thought it was distracting.
That's fair. But I thought he's tremendous here. One, I didn't realize it was him until I pulled up the IMDb
That's always a
list
good thing.
here. So he's not doing like over the top... He's not trying to let you know that it's him,
exactly.
You know?
Yep.
And then sort of the shift at the end, and they do put some sort of effect on his voice when he turns into the more monstrous form, but I thought he did just a tremendous job. And of course, we always have to mention Corey Burton, the legend himself.
He did at least three voices. I love that. It's a scene where he's talking to himself. He's Dr. Blizzard and he's the mayor.
Right, and he's the mayor, and he was also the ice cream truck driver who Green Lantern and Hawkgirl interrogate at one point. So you always know when Corey Burton's there, he's going to do at least 3 voices if you listen around for them.
Multi-talented.
And it's like legend. It's important parts too. Like he adds a lot to the parts that he does, but just an overall a stellar voice cast in this episode. Phil LaMarr as Green Lantern. This is one of his greatest episodes, in my opinion.
Yep.
One of the greatest single performances anybody in any of these cartoons has done.
I would agree.
Maria Canales also. This is one of the first episodes of Justice League where we've actually seen her get more than like 2 lines.
Yeah.
And I think she's really good in it as well.
She plays it really well.
In part 1 when she's really indignant about having to help Black Siren serve cookies,
be the woman, like the 50s woman. Yes.
That I thought that was fun to play, and then her sort of, as we mentioned, sort of comforting John at the end of part 2 as well, and again laying a little bit of groundwork for their sort of future relationship.
Absolutely.
And then you also have Carl Lumbly. He doesn't have much to do as John. He's incapacitated for a lot of both parts, but
he does that scream so well though when he's having
every
psychic
time I was
pain.
like that's burned into my brain. Like
John's
anytime I read a comic with Martian Manhunter and he gets attacked at all, I just hear that sound.
John's scream.
And I also really loved Michael Rosenbaum as the Flash.
He did great
because he does nothing Because in a lot of these episodes, he is comic relief, and he's doing a lot of puns and jokes and quips. But in this world, it's like he's found his heaven.
Yes.
Because the Dr. Blizzard is giving them right back to him.
Right.
So they're just going back and forth with a bunch of, like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze type cold puns.
Very good.
It's so good.
Yeah, my first thought was, the Flash is right at home here.
Right.
He's loving this.
So good.
He's eating this up. So what did you give a score for voice acting?
So for voice acting, I gave it a 10 out of 10.
Nice. I gave it 9 out of 10. You know,
Okay.
I think it's really, really good. I think I guess if I was nitpicking, I just feel like the performance. I like Tom Turbine's performance. I wish he had been given more.
Yes.
More to do, more to flesh that out. And it's not the voice acting. That I guess that it's just that he wasn't given as much to do.
That's fair.
And yeah, I 9 out of 10, I think, is a fair score.
It's certainly not
really
a bad.
good.
It's still an A. That's still an A.
It's still an A, absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess that would start to wrap us up. But wait a second.
Yes.
That was, of course, the bonus point sound, and
Yes.
I don't have bonus points this week, so you must.
I
Kyle.
do, actually, yes. I'm going to give a bonus point because this episode never fails to give me goosebumps. That's why I...
Plus one for Goosebumps?
Plus one for Goosebumps. You know, from the very beginning, when Tom Turbine shows up and he delivers the line... I mean, how many times have you and I repeated that line to each other in our
One of the most
lives?
quoted from the time that probably we first saw this episode all the way through to present day.
Perhaps you haven't heard, in Seaboard City, crime doesn't pay.
It's great. And when he throws it at Ray again at the end of it.
We died once to save this Earth, and we can do it again.
You'll be sorry you messed things up. What is this?
In Seaboard City, crime doesn't pay.
Yep. Seaboard. Oh man, I
Yeah.
got goosebumps just thinking about
When
it.
the
right
guild
now.
stands, puts their fists in the air, and shouts, "Let justice prevail."
It's and that end scene, the end scene where they decide that they're going to sacrifice themselves, being fully aware that you know they're giving up their lives in order to save somebody else's life.
Yeah.
You know, how can you not get emotional about that?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's drawings. Okay, it's fine. It's drawings, but just that act of that is always you know, I always appreciate seeing that in whatever media form it is. So plus one for Goosebumps.
All right, so that brings us towards our final scores here. I have this as a very, very strong 35 out of 40. Definitely one of my favorites that we've reviewed so far. Definitely the best Justice League episode we've reviewed so far.
Yeah.
What about you?
I gave it a very, very strong 38 out of 40.
Wow.
Very close to being perfect. You know, you can say it's nitpicky here or there. Very close to being perfect.
We're big believers in going with your guts when
That's
it comes
right.
to your original scores.
That's
And
right.
Just because we're close to 40, you shouldn't. We generally don't feel like we have to give it 40, but obviously 30 out of 40. One of your highest rateds ever on this as a 44th episode.
Yeah.
So plenty to choose from here, and there's not many that are in this era.
Agreed. Yeah, man.
Well, as we are wrapping up here, just want to thank you again for listening. Always thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us. Interact with us on Twitter at DCAU Review. Let us know your thoughts, your memories of this episode. Let us know what you'd like to see us review next. We're counting down towards our review at the end of this month on March 30th of the Justice League vs. Fatal 5. Brand new, so excited movie.
Man,
it's coming out. So we're reviewing Justice League all March long. Love to hear some other episodes you think we should review. Any other thoughts on this one? Maybe you're wrong and you think this is a bad episode. You can talk to us about your wrong opinions too.
That's right.
But other than that, they can do that. And, of course, head to DCAU Review. Cal, you've done such a good job setting up that site.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Especially for newer listeners. You can go search by show. You can check out if you want to hear our Batman the Animated Series episodes. You can search by any of the 4 shows. You can search by villains, by character. Real easy to navigate. If you prefer to stream the episodes rather than download them on a podcast app, that is the place to go.
Absolutely.
So on that note, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.